Athens, the most influential city-state of ancient Greece, once shone brightly in the long course of history. It not only gave birth to democracy, but also laid the foundation of Western philosophy. Legend has it that Athena bestowed upon the Athenians the olive tree, a symbol of peace, wisdom, and prosperity. In return, she won their cheers and reverence, becoming the guardian deity of the city. Many years later, as this once great city slipped into cultural decline, a man who claimed to bear a divine mission, seeking to awaken souls and defend the spirit of Athens, was sentenced to death in the name of democracy. It was one of the most poignant tragedies in human history. The protagonist of this tragedy drank the hemlock in peace, and yet, in the temple of philosophy, he became an eternal monument. He was the man later hailed as the father of Western philosophy, Socrates. Socrates' fate was closely intertwined with that of the Athenian city-state. So before we tell his story, let us first step into Athens during Socrates' time and see what this remarkable city was going through. The Golden Age of Athens. Socrates was born around 470 BCE, during what would become the height of Athenian civilization. The period from 460 to 429 BCE marked the so-called Golden Age of Athens, when General Pericles held leadership and enacted a series of profound political reforms that brought Athenian democracy to its zenith. During this time, the ecclesia, the citizen assembly convened 4 times a month, served as the highest decision-making body in Athens. It held authority over military, financial, diplomatic, and legislative affairs, including the election of officials and the determination of citizenship status. All adult male Athenian citizens had the right to attend, speak, and vote in the assembly, creating an unprecedented level of civic participation in the affairs of the polis. In the judicial realm, Athens adopted the dikastai, a system of people's courts in which large juries were selected by lot from among the citizens to adjudicate most civil and criminal cases. Except for specialized positions such as military generals, which required strategic expertise, most public offices were also assigned by lottery, a measure intended to prevent the concentration of power among elites. Furthermore, state salaries were provided for public service, enabling even poor citizens to participate in governance. These institutional reforms greatly expanded political participation and embodied one of the most extensive experiments in direct democracy in human history. Under this democratic system, Athens did experience remarkable prosperity, a flourishing economy, military strength, and a vibrant cultural life. Yet beneath this golden surface, a number of internal flaws gradually emerged: the distortion of democracy, short-sighted politics, moral decay, cultural vanity, and increasingly reckless military decisions. The horse and the gadfly. If the Greco-Persian Wars, which lasted for nearly half a century in the first half of the 5th century BCE, ultimately ended in a Greek victory, led by Athens and Sparta, and brought Athenian democracy to its zenith, then the Peloponnesian War, 431–404 BCE, a nearly 30-year-long civil conflict between the Delian League led by Athens and the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta, concluded with Athens' defeat and marked the beginning of the decline of democratic glory. Socrates personally lived through this dramatic arc, witnessing Athens' rise and fall, as well as the flaws in its democratic system that became increasingly apparent during this period. In 427 BCE, the city-state of Mytilene rebelled against the Delian League. After Athens suppressed the revolt, the assembly convened. Driven by a wave of vengeance, the citizenry initially voted, by an overwhelming majority, to execute all adult males of Mytilene. Fortunately, on the following day, a second debate was held, initiated by rational moderates such as Diodotus. He argued that mass slaughter was neither just nor prudent. Amid confusion and tension, the assembly voted again and by a narrow margin reversed its previous decision. The execution order was rescinded and the Athenian trireme sent to carry out the massacre was recalled just in time, averting a humanitarian catastrophe. Socrates often said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." The Millennian affair serves as a stark counterexample to this principle, exposing the vulnerability of direct democracy to emotional impulses and the danger of majority tyranny. In 415 BCE, the Athenian assembly convened to debate whether to accept an appeal from the Sicilian city-state of Egesta, which had requested military aid in its conflict against Syracuse, a powerful city allied with Sparta. Alcibiades, a man of striking appearance and exceptional eloquence, roused public enthusiasm with promises of unlimited wealth and imperial expansion, stirring the citizens into a state of excitement and vanity that clouded rational judgment. In contrast, the experienced general Nicias, who had earlier brokered the Peace of Nicias that brought years of relative calm, repeatedly offered sober warnings before the assembly. He cautioned that the expedition would drain resources and pose unpredictable risks. However, lacking the charisma and flair of Alcibiades, Nicias failed to sway the popular vote. The people, driven by rhetorical persuasion and short-term ambition, ignored prudence, and the outcome proved disastrous. The Sicilian expedition ended in total defeat. Athens lost nearly 30,000 soldiers, more than half its fleet, and suffered a catastrophic blow to its strength and morale. The Peace of Nicias collapsed, and the Peloponnesian War resumed in full force, setting the stage for Athens' eventual downfall. As Socrates warned, decisions made without scrutiny lead to the ruin of cities. A paraphrase inspired by his famous dictum, "The unexamined life is not worth living." In 406 BCE, Athens achieved a major naval victory against Sparta in the Battle of Arginusae, destroying nearly 20 enemy ships. However, a sudden and violent storm prevented the rescue of sailors who had fallen overboard, resulting in the drowning of over 1,000 Athenian crew members. Upon the general's return to Athens, 6 commanders who had led the operation, later known as the Arginusae generals, were accused of failing in their duty to rescue the shipwrecked. At the assembly, the orator Calixenus delivered a fiery speech, stirring public outrage and calling on the citizens to punish negligence with a heart of stone. The assembly quickly passed a decree. The generals would be tried collectively rather than individually, and sentenced to death for dereliction of duty, without separate trials or defenses. Socrates stood firmly against the proposal, insisting that the procedure was grossly unjust. He argued that the accused were denied their right to defend themselves, violating a long-standing Athenian principle, no judgment without a prior hearing. He urged that the cases be handled separately, allowing each general to speak before any vote was taken. Despite Socrates' protest, the emotionally charged assembly narrowly voted to execute all 6 generals. The decision caused chaos within the Athenian military command, and the navy never fully recovered its strength. Socrates' resistance could not save the innocent lives, but it marked a turning point in his disillusionment with the degeneration of Athenian democracy. After the disastrous defeat of the Sicilian expedition, the Athenian public grew increasingly disillusioned with the decision-making capacity of democratic governance. As the war dragged on and the city's finances deteriorated, political divisions intensified. In 411 BCE, a group of radical oligarchs, backed by the military and aristocracy, abolished democracy and established a Council of 400, a regime later known as the Oligarchy of the 400. This regime sought to strip power from the common people, dissolve the popular assembly, and eliminate sortition, selection by lot, in favor of centralized control. They created a secret committee to arrest dissenters and imposed strict limits on speech and assembly. Although this oligarchy was soon replaced by a more moderate government of the 5,000, composed of wealthier citizens with limited democratic functions, the episode exposed the vulnerability of democracy to elite manipulation. Just 6 years later, in 404 BCE, Athens was defeated in the Peloponnesian War and occupied by Sparta. Under Spartan influence, 30 political figures seized power, overthrew the democracy, and established a regime of terror known as the 30 Tyrants. They confiscated property, exiled or executed political opponents, and ruled by force for over a year. During this period, Socrates was invited to serve on an oversight committee, but he refused the position, citing his belief in equality before the law. Though the tyranny of the 30 was overthrown within a year and democracy was restored, Socrates had witnessed firsthand how the Athenian assembly could be swayed by emotion, manipulated by skilled orators, and driven into injustice by majority rule. The constant oscillation between democracy and tyranny revealed the fragility of Athenian politics, a world dominated by moral corruption, ambition, vanity, and ignorance, from the masses to the ruling elite. To Socrates, Athens had become a noble yet slumbering horse, and in the face of this slumbering horse, Socrates chose to be the gadfly. As he declared solemnly in Plato's Apology, "I am that gadfly which the god has attached to the city. I never cease to rouse you all day long, everywhere I alight, always arousing and reproaching you." His chosen method, to sting in order to awaken, became known as the Socratic method, a relentless practice of asking questions, exposing ignorance, and leading others to self-examination and critical thought. Though he knew this would provoke resentment and resistance, Socrates believed it was Athens' only hope of saving itself and the truest way to live by his guiding principle: the unexamined life is not worth living. The sting of the gadfly. 1. Is justice merely the interest of the strong? In Book Y of Plato's Republic, the dialogue begins as Socrates, Glaucon, Polemarchus, and others debate the question, what is justice? Suddenly, the rhetorician Thrasymachus bursts into the conversation in anger.
Socrates, you're always asking questions but never offering answers. Since no one has defined justice clearly, I will.
I'm all ears, Thrasymachus. Please go ahead.
Justice is nothing but the advantage of the stronger. In every form of government, whether democracy, oligarchy, or tyranny, the rulers make laws to benefit themselves. They call these laws just. So when people obey them, they are being just. Therefore, I say, justice is serving the interest of the ruling power.
When you say the stronger, do you mean the rulers?
Of course.
But rulers are human beings, right? And human beings can make mistakes and create laws that are not in their own best interest?
Yes, humans can make mistakes.
Then if citizens obey those mistaken laws, aren't they acting against the interests of the rulers?
You could say that.
Yet you said justice is following the laws, which means following the rulers' interests. But now their so-called just behavior ends up harming the rulers. Doesn't that contradict your definition?
That's sophistry. What I really mean is, true rulers don't make mistakes. They always enact laws that benefit themselves.
Ah, I see. So we're no longer talking about rulers in the ordinary sense, but about ideal rulers, masters of the art of governance who never err. Let's talk about art, Thrasymachus. For instance, does a physician practice medicine for the health of the patient or for his own benefit?
For the patient's health.
And does a ship captain navigate to ensure the passenger's safety, not just for his own pleasure?
Correct.
Then if ruling is a true art or craft, it must aim at the benefit of the governed, not the private gain of the ruler. If that's the case, then justice must be the principle by which rulers serve the good of the people, not a tool for self-interest.
Don't be naive, Socrates. In the real world, it's the unjust who have more power, wealth, and freedom.
But what if everyone were unjust? What would happen to the city? Soldiers wouldn't cooperate. Families would break down. Friends would betray each other. Could such a city even survive?
Probably not.
Then can you still say that injustice brings true strength? Or is it in fact what causes all things to fall apart?
The sting of the Gadfly, too. Is freedom the same as indulgence? Plato's Gorgias records the following dialogue.
Socrates, your ideas are full of hypocrisy. Nature clearly shows that the strong are born to rule over the weak. What you call justice is nothing more than a lie invented by the weak to protect themselves.
So, according to you, Callicles, the truly happy person is the one who constantly seeks gratification?
Absolutely. Indulgence is freedom. To suppress one's desires is to live a miserable life.
Then let me ask you, if someone keeps filling his stomach yet is never satisfied, would you call him happy? Isn't he like a leaky jar, a sieve with holes that can never be filled?
That's just a metaphor.
And if, in a city, everyone pursues only their own pleasures and refuses to practice moderation, wouldn't the result be civil strife and collapse? The truly strong are those with order and self-control, those who can govern their own souls. By contrast, those who are dragged around by their desires, they are not masters, but slaves. So what truly makes both individuals and cities strong is not indulgence, but moderation, the justice of the soul.
The sting of the Gadfly 3. The qualifications of public officials. In Xenophon's Memorabilia, the following dialogue takes place.
Tell me, Critobulus, if a man has a toothache, whom does he consult?
A dentist, of course.
And if he has trouble with his eyes?
He goes to an eye doctor.
And if a ship is in danger, whom does he seek out?
A pilot or a captain.
Then if someone wants to learn how to govern well, to whom should he turn?
I suppose to a statesman or a lawgiver.
Yet you yourself have had no training in governance, and still you insist on taking part in elections and holding public office. How does that make sense?
The sting of the Gadfly 4. The cook and the physician. In Plato's Gorgias, the following exchange is recorded.
Suppose there are two arts concerned with the body. One is cookery, the other is medicine. Cookery gratifies the body with delicious food, bringing pleasure. Medicine, on the other hand, applies bitter remedies to restore health. Now tell me, Gorgias, which one would you say truly cares for the body's real good, the cook or the physician?
The physician, of course.
Likewise, rhetoricians who merely flatter their audience with pleasing speeches and seek public acclaim are like cooks, while true philosophers, who pursue justice and truth in the soul, are like physicians.
Yet the sting of the Gadfly often provokes the horse to rage. Socrates' relentless questioning aroused the anger of the people. Still, he insisted on being the Gadfly. Why? Midwife of the soul. Year after year, day after day, Socrates wandered tirelessly through the marketplaces, public squares, and private gatherings, diligently engaging people in questions, debates, and reflection. He posed his inquiries to people of all backgrounds, rich or poor, high or low in status, and his questions spanned diverse realms: the individual soul, self-knowledge, virtue, the public domain, politics, law, epistemology, knowledge and education, and religious practice, piety, rituals. He asked politicians, what is justice? He asked generals, what is courage? He asked judges, what makes a law fair and reasonable? He asked jurors, is justice always identical to the law? And if the law is unjust, what then? He asked wise men, what is the good? Can we define the essence shared by all virtues? He asked rhetoricians, how does rhetoric differ from true persuasion, philosophy? He asked craftsmen, "Does your technical skill give you knowledge of goodness and justice?" He asked young men, "What is a happy life?" He asked ambitious students, "Why do you desire honor and power?" He asked teachers, "What is knowledge? How is belief different from knowledge?" He asked poets, "Does the beauty in your poetry come from knowledge?" Whenever people responded with conventional or self-assured answers, Socrates would calmly, step by step, use logic and inquiry to reveal their lack of true understanding. Naturally, this discomforted many and even angered some. He was accused, "You ask questions all day long without offering conclusions or teaching doctrines. In the end, it's all emptiness. How can that be called education?" Socrates replied, "I openly admit, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. I do not claim to possess true knowledge, nor to have divine revelations to pass on to others. What I do, at the command of the god, is to serve as a gadfly, forever stinging the great horse that is Athens, to awaken it to self-examination. If I were to tell you what truth is, without making you examine yourselves, it would only lull you further into complacency, like a lazy horse." Declared by the oracle of Delphi as the wisest of men, Socrates clearly understood that true wisdom begins with the recognition of one's own ignorance. His mission was to awaken the citizens of Athens from the arrogant slumber of self-assurance, to challenge everything they had ever assumed to be true. As he said in Plato's Theaetetus, Socrates compared himself to a midwife of the soul. "If they carry within them a child of wisdom, I help them bring it to birth." Socrates' final reflections. On a day in June of 399 BCE, the over 70-year-old Socrates calmly took the cup of hemlock poison handed to him by the prison guard and drank it without hesitation. A wave of weeping immediately swept through the room. Surrounded by his followers, some covering their faces in grief, some overcome with fury, others choked with sorrow, Socrates remained astonishingly serene. He rose and walked a few steps. At first he felt nothing unusual, but soon he noticed a numbness creeping into his legs. Just as the guard had described beforehand, the moment was approaching. Socrates then lay down calmly. The guard checked his bodily responses, then draped a cloth over his head. With his eyes closed, tears still audible around him, the numbness slowly crept from his legs upward, but his mind remained sharp and clear. In that moment, 70 years of life flooded his memory like mist. He recalled his father, who had once hoped to pass on to him the craft of sculpture. He remembered his mother, a midwife, who often boasted about the strong and beautiful babies she had delivered, and his wife, burdened with the care of 3 sons and a life of ceaseless labor, was notorious for her temper, her moods often flaring like thunder and storm. He saw his younger self, eagerly seeking wisdom from the aged philosopher Parmenides and his tall, striking student Zeno. He saw himself in his prime, fighting in the Peloponnesian War, braving spears, arrows, and bloodshed in battle against the Spartans. He saw Athens wounded by war, occupied by foreign powers, then swinging from tyranny to democracy. He saw the Athenian assembly, swayed by dazzling oratory, condemning innocents and leading the city astray, all in the name of democracy. He saw himself as a gadfly, forever stinging the great and sluggish horse that was Athens, only to be, in the end, trampled beneath its hooves. Socrates lay still, the numbness continuing to rise. His thoughts drifted back just a month before, when the crowded market square buzzed with voices, and the people packed the Heliaia, the people's court, their angry cries still echoing in his ears.
Socrates, you always claim to hear a voice. This is proof of your impiety. You do not believe in the gods of the city, but instead follow new spiritual agencies.
Meletus, tell me plainly, do you accuse me of believing in no gods at all, or of introducing new divinities? because these two charges contradict each other. If I truly believed in no gods, how could I possibly believe in any spiritual beings? You accuse me in the same breath of both denying and believing in divine things. Isn't that self-contradictory? As for these so-called new spiritual voices, I have heard such a voice, what I call my daimonion, since childhood. It never tells me what to do, but it always restrains me when I am about to do something wrong. It is a divine sign, guiding me not to act unjustly or contrary to the will of the God. If I am condemned for obeying this divine sign, then so be it. I will die in loyalty to the divine rather than in obedience to the opinions of men.
Socrates, why do you go around questioning people and arguing all the time? You corrupt the youth and undermine the morals of the city.
When I heard the oracle at Delphi proclaim that no one is wiser than me, I was baffled. I sought to test it by questioning those reputed to be wise. I went to a statesman, only to discover he thought he was wise, but was not. He grew angry with me. And so I understood. True wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. So I continued, as the God directed, examining everyone who claimed to have wisdom, searching for someone who truly did. This mission has consumed all my time and wealth, left me without a political career, and reduced me to poverty, but I remained entirely devoted to the divine command. If I truly corrupted the youth, wouldn't they one day turn on me? No one willingly harms themselves. If I harmed them unknowingly, then I should be educated alongside them, not punished. If you truly care for the youth, why not assign someone to guide them better, rather than simply demanding my death? What's more, I never charged fees, never brought students home to teach them in private. Have you ever seen me take money to promote corruption? Have you heard me say, "Come, let us do wrong together"? You have no witnesses.
Socrates, we will spare your life if you stop your inquiries and teaching and cease questioning people in public.
Otherwise, he must be put to death.
I am not defending myself here. I am defending you. To condemn me would be to wrong the God whose command I obey. If you say, "Socrates, we'll let you go. Just stop doing philosophy," I can only reply, "Athenians, I honor you, but I must obey the God before I obey you. As long as I have life and strength, I shall never cease practicing philosophy, questioning, and teaching. If you kill me, you will harm yourselves more than me. I am the Gadfly the God has placed upon this city, a great and noble horse, but sluggish and in need of stirring. I prod you to wake, to reflect, to improve. You may not easily find another like me, so I beg you, spare me. If I were to tell you that the greatest blessing is to converse each day about virtue and to examine life, and then say that the unexamined life is not worth living, you would not believe me. But this is the truth, whether you accept it or not. I have never taken a fee, never sought fame or fortune. If anything, I should be fed at the public expense, like a hero who raises children, so that I may continue discussing philosophy in the agora. You may think my proposal too bold. Then punish me however you like, but I will not choose exile or silence, because I firmly believe the unexamined life is not worth living, and to stop questioning would be to strip life of its value.
It was all ending now. 70 years of inquiry, argument, and stubborn faith were coming to a close. Socrates lay in silence, listening to his own heartbeat slowing. Amidst the sobbing, someone cried, "Teacher, we've prepared everything. You could still escape. Aren't you afraid of death?" Socrates gave no answer aloud. But in his heart, he recalled what he had said before. To flee would be to answer injustice with injustice, but one must never do wrong, even in response to wrong. Death is one of two things, either a dreamless sleep, the deepest rest imaginable, or a journey of the soul to another world, where I might meet the wise and the just, and speak to the judges of the underworld. If the soul is immortal, then what reason is there to fear death, for the one who has remained true to reason and the good? Suddenly, Socrates remembered something unfinished. He pulled the cloth from his face, turned to his friend and said, "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt." Asclepius was the Greek god of healing. In ancient tradition, a rooster was offered in thanks when one was cured. Having spoken these last words, Socrates exhaled slowly, and in the moment his breath ceased, it was as though his soul had broken free from the bonds of the body and found peace. The father of philosophy. Before Socrates, early philosophy was inseparable from what we now call natural science. From Thales to Democritus, the pre-Socratic philosophers were primarily concerned with the origin and nature of the cosmos. What is the fundamental substance of the world? It wasn't until Socrates and the sophists of his time that philosophy turned from the cosmos back toward the human being. But whereas Protagoras focused on relativism and human perception and the art of persuasion through rhetoric, Socrates was the first to place ethical questions at the very center of philosophy. He almost completely abandoned speculation about the workings of nature and instead asked, how should we live? What is democracy, justice, happiness, and virtue? Though Socrates never claimed to have final answers to these questions, that is precisely his greatest contribution to philosophy. He taught that we must always be on guard against imposed dogmas, never presume we know, but instead practice self-examination and the awakening of true understanding. To the end of his life, he embodied this spirit, even at the cost of death, refusing to abandon the pursuit of truth, a stance that deeply inspired his students such as Plato and many later thinkers. Throughout his life, Socrates took upon himself the role of the midwife of the soul and acted as a gadfly to Athenian society. Through what came to be known as the Socratic method, he aimed to awaken citizens from their assumptions, helping them seek and follow truth and live an examined life. Though Athens condemned him in the name of democracy, his student Plato inherited his thought and constructed a comprehensive political and ethical system in the Republic, while Plato's student Aristotle, building on Socrates' focus on conceptual clarity and definition, developed formal logic, including the syllogism, which became the foundation of Western logical science. Together, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle not only formed an intellectual lineage, but each opened new domains of philosophy: methodology, Socrates; system building, Plato; and scientific classification, Aristotle. They became the pillars of Western philosophical and scientific tradition and the enduring symbols of classical thought. Thus, they are often called the three great masters of Western philosophy, and Socrates is rightfully honored as the father of Western philosophy. Socrates' sayings, wisdom across millennia. More than 2,000 years have passed. The world may have changed beyond recognition, yet the voice of Socrates still pierces the soul, compelling us to ask, do we truly understand the beliefs we hold? Let us pause and quietly listen to the wisdom that has echoed across millennia. The unexamined life is not worth living. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. I possess no knowledge, nor do I teach it. I am but a midwife to the soul. Death is either a dreamless sleep or the soul's migration to another place. Judges face death with joy, believing that no harm can come to a good man after death. If I must cease inquiry to live, I would rather die than abandon my mission. I do not fear death, but I do fear injustice. No one sends an untaught musician into a contest, so why entrust leadership to those untrained in statesmanship? I act on divine command. As a gadfly stings a sluggish horse, I stir Athens to awaken. Truth that has not been examined is unworthy of the name. Knowing that something is not the same as knowing why it is. The most wretched soul is the one imprisoned in the body and never released. I am unmoved by public opinion. True good and evil are not decided by the majority. Justice is the order and harmony of the soul. If I must choose between justice and survival, I choose justice. True knowledge is virtue. Awareness of ignorance is the first step to wisdom. It is not wealth that brings virtue, but virtue that brings true wealth and happiness. It is better to care for the soul than to profit the body. It is not life itself, but right living that truly matters. I do not teach answers. I awaken you to think.